This is the Arduino tutorial number 3 hosted by the real Tony Stark. In this tutorial we'll be covering topics such as Arduino structure and syntax. For this tutorial you will need the Arduino software and a giant koala egg. So what are we talking about with structure and syntax? Well, really what we mean is how does the code look when we write it out, and what language are we using that the Arduino can understand? Because computers can't understand straight English. They can be programmed to do their best to interpret it, but really to run basic programs, they have to have a language that they understand better. As programming languages go, if you're not familiar with any at all, Arduino is a really nice one. It does have a lot in common with English, so it is a lot easier to grasp than others. So that will help, hopefully, if you've never done this before. Now, I'm going to be covering a number of topics in this video, but if you want more information on each of these, I really recommend that you go and check out the Arduino.cc website and go to the reference page. Now, on here is their language reference. Okay, we're talking about pretty much every type of function or control structure. It breaks down everything well, not everything, but a lot of the language that is used in Arduino, and explains how to use them. So if you went to the if statement, it will tell you, here's how it works, here's some examples, here's some ways to work, and be careful with these. So it's going to go into a lot more detail than mine, but it's still based on, or they assume that you really have had no experience with this when you come here. So it's a really great spot for beginners, for reference, even once you got a hang of this stuff, to come back here and say, oh, that's right, that's how you use that. So I'm going to be going over these sections today, and let's talk about each of them now. So first thing I want to actually do is talk about bare minimum. Now, I found this if you go into File, Examples, Basics, Bare Minimum. Now, what is bare minimum? Well, that's the basic minimum amount of code you need to run an Arduino program. I could upload this right now to my Arduino, and it would run. Now, it wouldn't do anything, but it would run. Let's break this down. Let's see what is the minimum and why do we need it. We're looking at the first thing. It says void setup bracket bracket bracket. What does this mean? So void really just means that it's not any distinct type of it's not designated as anything special. It is just a block of code that we want to run. Now, as soon as we follow up void with setup, this now can run once. This happens at the beginning of your code, and as its name implies, it is to set up a number of factors before the main meat of your code runs down here. So when you have anything in the setup, it will run only once, as it says here. So what types of things go into setup? Well, we're talking about things like the speed of the communication between your Arduino and your computer. We're talking about the pins on an Arduino. Are they inputs or outputs? Do we want to set some of them at certain values before the rest of the code goes? This is where all that would happen. This is stuff even like an ambient light reading. Right before you do anything else, very first thing, let's just take an ambient light reading, boom. Okay, now we'll get to those in later tutorials, but that's what happens in the setup. In the void loop, as the name implies, this will happen repeatedly forever. Now the forever part is kind of silly if you're trying to think, well, I just want to turn a light on and off once. But what we're really looking at there is if you have a switch and you want to turn the light on and off, it needs to continuously check that switch over and over and over again. And so that's why it's in a loop that goes on forever. Now, you can put in criteria in there that it only checks it for this amount of time, and then it moves on to check something different. But it will run whatever code is in here forever. And that's really what you want. This is a system that is continuously monitoring some sort of event and then making something happen. So what about the actual syntax? So let's take a look at this. These brackets, we don't really need to know too much about them right now. There is a lot more detailed stuff you can get into with them, but just know that they have to come after a function. This is essentially a function here, which means it's its own block of code. That's what these guys imply. When I click right after this, it shows me the one that it's linked to. So that means that same thing here, if I click after this one, it highlights this one. It shows me that these two curly braces are linked. Anything in here is part of this function, whatever we have right in front of this curly brace. Okay, these brackets really come into hand. What I'll be using them for is when we create our own functions, our own blocks of code, in a much farther tutorial. So same thing for this one. This curly brace is tied to this one, so anything you put in between them will be run. But now you're thinking, but Ryan, why do they have this? This looks like real English. I can read it. It doesn't look like code, and they put it in between here. So does that mean it's going to tell the Arduino to put its setup code in here? No, but that's very observant of you. In fact, these two guys right here denote a comment. So anything that follows on this line, okay, will be part of this comment and shows up as gray. So if I were to put it on the next line and type something, notice that it is now black, and it would try to run that gibberish, and it wouldn't like it. So it's very important that if you have something that you want to make notes about in your code, which is very, very, very important that you do, use these after a line. So what if we wanted to add in our own comment? Well, I highly encourage you to do that. For example, in our previous example of the monkey, well, it said something like, if water is hot. So we could say if temp is greater than 100 degrees, I guess, then remove monkey. Now, that code itself may not make sense yet, but what I'm trying to do is show you how to use a proper comment. So if we put a statement in there, right after it I'm going to say if the water temperature is hot, don't put the monkey in. Okay, and there we can use plain English, and it really helps not only us understand what we've done in case we need to come back and figure it out, but for anyone else who reads our code, make sure that they understand what it is we're doing here. So be as explicit as you can when you place any comments in your code, and I always use as many comments as you can. It's just really good programming practice. Okay, so that is basically it for the bare minimum. This is really all that you need to get code going. Now we're going to have to introduce a number of other things to make the code do what we want, but this is the bare minimum. So now we're going to take a look at some of the other control structures and further syntax. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go over the website here, and we can talk about each of these just briefly, and I'll do a separate video for most of them following this tutorial. So the first one is the if statement, and as I said, the website really breaks it down for us. The if statement, and they've shown us an example of how it's written here, if conditional something in the middle, some sort of comparison, okay, and then a condition. So that's what we're looking for. Here's an example. If some variable is greater than 50, do something here. All right, there's the really challenging part of this if statement. The things to notice from that, I'm going to copy this and put it into our other window here, the actual Arduino window. If some variable is greater than 50, notice first of all that the if turns orange. Okay, all of the functions from that list, which we'll be covering, will turn orange thanks to the Arduino software recognizing them as specific things, part of the language that it knows. And what's great is that you just have to make sure that you're using. So the only thing to note though is that it must be lowercase. Okay, a capital if will not turn orange, and therefore it's not recognized by the code as what we actually want here. So if then we have an open bracket, a round bracket is what we're looking for. Some comparison in here is what we want to do. So in this case they're saying some variable is greater than 50. In our monkey scenario from before, we could be talking about if water temp is greater than 100. degrees. Okay, and again, we want to put our comment in here. We say if the temp of the water is greater than 100. Okay, that's what we're looking for, is some sort of comparison. All right. Then we have our open brace, just like with the void setup, void loop. This is tied to this if statement now. Now you can put this underneath, or you can put it on the same line directly after this open bracket. It doesn't really matter. I mean, I could put it all the way over here too. It ignores this stuff completely, and it even ignores new lines. You could put this all in one line if you wanted, but if for our legibility, for reading, I find it's a lot easier if you break this up into multiple lines for your code. So do something here. Well, in this case, if the water temp is greater than 100, we want to say water or hot water equals false. So that would be turn off hot water. Okay, and what we've done here basically is this is a very basic if statement. If the water temp is greater than 100, turn off the hot water. Okay, and again we have that curly brace at the end to make sure that this is the only stuff that's resulting from this statement. Now, if we go back to our page here, the next one says if else. Now these are tied very similar together. This is saying if pin 5 input is less than 500. So whatever, another random thing they've come up with. If it's less than 500, do action A. Else means otherwise, do action B. And notice that the else has its own set of curly braces. So in our example, we're looking at this. The hot water is, okay, we say, oh, I'm going to have to do this after my curly brace. We can say else, and we can say open curly brace, and we can say hot water equals true. Keep hot water running. Okay, we've just got a new statement. Now again, when I do my else statements, I like to put them kind of on a new line so I can see that these curly braces are tied to this statement. This is all part of the same one. This is not the only way to write it. This is how a lot of programmers use Arduino, or most types of code. It's nice just to arrange your things. Notice also that I'm indenting as I go. So just like with the bare minimum, you would see that they've indented the next line, and it's really important to do that for legibility so we can read what is written a lot easier. So for each function, notice that the curly brace lines up with its original line here, so same for this, and then we've indented the next parts. So that's it for an else. The only other one is combining them. So what if we had that perfect water temperature? Well, I'll go here, go back, close that off. We say else if. Okay, what's the condition for that? Well, we say water temp equals 100 exactly. Open curly brace. And we say insert monkey. And we already got our closed curly brace here, linked up for this else if. So now it's got 3 conditions that it can watch for, and it will check them all. It'll check this one, didn't work. Okay, check this one, didn't work. Oh, if it's anything else, then we do this. So we've got 3 different conditions here in an if statement that is all tied to this original one. But you can put in a different condition here, more specific, and then you can cover whatever's left over, whatever conditions you didn't cover will be covered by the else at the end. So that is really how an if and else statement work. The next thing we want to look at is for statements. So we'll go back to the website here. This is a for statement, and what we're talking about with these is simply it's kind of a counter. It will run a certain block of code a certain number of times. So in this case, they're going from 0 to 100. You can put in as many or as few times as you need the code to run. Going back to our example with our monkey, it said wash the monkey 3 times. This would be a perfect spot to use a for statement where we want it to do the washing procedure 3 times and then continue on with whatever's next. Alright, so this is where for statements, and I'll do a whole video on that in the future. Switch case. Now, switch case is kind of like our if, else, else, but this is a simpler version. It uses less amount of space on your in your program, and it's a little bit it's a different format that you have to write it in. But really, what it's looking at is, okay, here's the switch. So the variable. So what are we considering? What are we looking at? So temperature of the water could be in here. Okay, case 1. So that's the case when the variable is 1. All right. So in this case, we could say if the temperature is exactly 1 degree, do this. If the temperature is exactly 5 degrees, do this. So, and then the default is kind of like the else in an if statement, where it does whatever else is left or whatever numbers we didn't consider. Now, for temperature, it doesn't make much sense that you'd be looking for those specific ones, but there are a lot of cases where you'd want to check for each type of number. You could be setting the mode in your of something in your code. Okay, after switch case, we are looking at while. Okay, now just like while, it does something while a condition is true or false. So what we're looking at here is, here's your while statement. Okay, and for example, you could do something like, we'll get rid of that one. We say while expression. Okay, while temperature or water temp is less than 100, hot water equals true. Okay, and that means add hot water. So this is now kind of like an if statement, but what it does is it will keep repeating this over and over and over again and not do any other code after or before until it accomplishes whatever conditions in here. So in this case, it's saying while the water temperature is less than 100, just keep adding hot water. And it won't even look at any other sensors or anything as long as this is true. Now, that means we got to put some code in here to say, like, check the temperature of the water. And I'm not going to do that right now, but we have to make sure that we're checking that condition inside of this while in order for it to be able to get out of that. Otherwise, it will go infinitely and never know if the water temp is greater than 100. Okay, so that's a while statement. Very similar to that is the DoWhile statement. And what we're looking at is something that's basically the same thing. It's going to do whatever is in between while this condition is what it is. So if I were to do this opposite, I'm going to put this part down here. So the while part comes at the end in a DoWhile. But the difference is it will run this code regardless of whatever this is. So this will run at least once, and then it will check the condition. Okay, so that's really important to note the distinction. If you just do a while, it's going to check the condition, and it may not run anything in here at all. Whereas if you have the do, it's going to run this, then it's going to check it. And if it meets a condition, it'll just continue on. Otherwise, it'll go back and do the exact same thing as a while statement. So know the difference. They work almost the same, but they are a little different. Break. Break is a way to get out of a continuous loop, or a for loop, which is only for a certain number of things. But let's say you get to a condition where let's check for the monkey starts screaming. Okay, if monkey starts screaming, then break. Okay, so just get him out of the water. Let's just cancel the whole washing procedure. You want to get him out. So a break is used in a do, for, while, and even switch statements as well. Okay, that's a switch case. So break, again, is for special conditions when you want to get out of the loop, just stop whatever it's doing and continue on with the code. Okay, next, continue, okay, and return. We're not going to get too much into these. You're welcome to go and read them yourself. The only one I really want to talk about here is the goTo. goTo is really poor form of programming. goTo really you can tell it to go to a specific spot in your code. So in our monkey example, let's say you turn on the water and he's in there, and then you say go to drying the monkey, and then you say go to check if he's clean, and then go to. So what it does, allows you to jump around your code, but it's really, really difficult to keep track of where your code is going because it doesn't flow from a top-down manner anymore. Now it's moving back and forth, and for anyone to follow that, even for yourself to follow it, it can get really, really confusing and messy. So try to stay away from GoTo. It's really an old form that isn't used as much anymore. So let's talk about syntax. Now, the semicolon is key in this. It is for like a period at the end of a sentence. All right, so we're going to use these. This one here is saying integer a, so this is a variable, is equal to 13. End of statement. We have just told it something very important. This is 13. End of statement. That's all we need. Okay, so we'll get into more of this later when we actually write our first code. But just always check. This is the number one error that you're going to find when you write your code. You're going to get you try to upload it, and it will say it's missing one of these somewhere. Okay, so that's a semicolon. Next, we have the curly braces, which I already talked about. They kind of just hold a section of code inside of them, right? So they're for functions, they're for loops, conditional statements. These are the three main spots where you're going to use them. Single line comments, I've already talked about. Okay, so this is just to put anything on this line. You're going to put another one down here. A multi-line comment, which is explained in the next one, is also here. It uses a / star to start the multi-line comment. So anything in here is going to be a comment, and then, including other comments, and then if you put another one, a star / is going to end that block of comment. So this entire thing is not acknowledged by the Arduino, only for our reference. And that's really good if you write a section of code that you want to kind of omit just to test the rest. You can just put that whole thing in a comment. You don't have to delete it, and it will ignore it until you want to bring it back in and remove these characters. Last one I'll talk about is include, and this is for using libraries. And we'll get to those again in later videos. But include is always put way before the setup. You want to include whatever library you want to do. So include tone.h. And again, I'll get more into that in future videos, but that's the other piece of code that we'll want to use future. So that's further syntax. So that's basically it for the structures and syntax portion. I think we will move on to variables in the next video. And there's a whole lot, as you can see, to cover with those. Hopefully that this was useful so far. If you have any specific things that you need more clarification on, please comment in the comment section below. And thanks for watching.